Morning, Year 11. Just a couple of last minute videos that people are asking for. Going to go theme 6 public health, just to get you moving in the run up to the medicine exam. I'll do a couple more. If you could put in the comments or the chat underneath when you comment on the video, nothing nasty or personal, that'd be great. But if you could just put what you want down as videos in the next couple of days, I'll make as many as I can. Okay, right, so here we go, public health. Now, public health came up a couple of years ago. It basically means what has the government done over time about living conditions and public health, which is water and toilets and things like that. Okay, so in the medieval period, first thing to mention is a positive example of Coventry. So generally in the medieval period, everything is pretty bad, but Coventry is an example that's good, as in they have waste collection. They have disposal sites all around the outskirts of the city walls. There is a fine for not cleaning the street in front of your house for 12p. And that's generally why we use Coventry. It's a good example. The ban for dumping waste in the river, which obviously shows that they made a link between dirty water for drinking and dirty water is causing illness and disease. So that's an example of positive public health in the medieval. However, mostly everywhere else it is laissez-faire, which means the government does nothing. There is no government a lot of times, just kings or queens, and if they can't be bothered, no one bothers. It's unsanitary, waste is dumped into the rivers, peasants have to boil stuff, including lettuce, so they don't get ill. So generally, public health in the medieval period is terrible. Another example to mention is the Catholic Church is the only organisation that controls anything in terms of public health, hospitals or anything like that. Oh, you could also mention public health, you've got almshouses, leper hospitals, that sort of thing. But generally just paint the same picture that we always paint in the medieval period. There's very little goes on that shows any real development because there is no understanding of really what causes illness and disease. Right, into the early modern period, 1500 to 1750. First big example, the only real big specific example is Eyam, which is where the Great Plague is dealt with in terms of a public health study a lot better than it's dealt with in other areas of the country. As in, Mompson and Stanley organised a quarantine. They organised sterilisation of coins when people come to collect supplies, and basically bury bodies in the garden immediately. They burn everyone's possessions. So there's a pretty uniform response in Eyam to dealing with the Great Plague. It's very effective. It stops the plague from spreading around the north of England. You've also got that in London. The Great Fire of London, we start building houses with distancing apart from them. We start looking at the building materials that they're using in their building of buildings as well, because obviously they link that to the fact the plague spread. Also, we've got quarantine in London in terms of like isolating people in their houses for 30 days and 30 nights with a cross on the door. And we've also got burial of dead at night, so moving the bodies is less of a public health risk. So generally we see a bit of improvement in our response to the plague in the early modern period, and that is what I'll mention for this period of time. We've also got isolated cases of different kings and queens doing things to do with public health. So Henry VIII builds sewers and bans disposal into the river from slaughterhouses. So generally we see kings and queens do a little bit more in the early modern, but that's obviously probably because medicine is moving on a little bit, scientific approach is moving on a bit, but there is no consistent government again through the early modern period. That's what I put. Generally, we see some very similar conditions to what we've seen in the medieval period. We see laissez-faire, and we see a lack of knowledge and understanding, and no real general joined up thinking. Now, into the modern era. Now, initially, modern era in terms of the industrial period, so 1800s, 19th century, is really, really negative. Britain is overpopulated, it's overcrowded, there is no government. Again, the government's very laissez-faire. The rich basically see it as not their responsibility. Taxes aren't used to improve public health. And then we see some improvements. Now, we've done one massive case study in terms of Ancoats. There's also individuals like Salt, who builds Saltaire, who shows basically how if you pay attention to workers' health and workers' rights, you can create better living conditions and working conditions. You've got Chadwick, who is obviously in Ancoats, but he also is responsible for the first Public Health Act, which cleans up the streets of London, and he's obviously a member of the Clean Party as well. And you see a big effort in Birmingham where Chamberlain takes control of the city's gas and water, charges everybody for gas and water, and then use the funds and the proceeds from that to rebuild Birmingham and make public facilities like parks, etc. So some pretty big moves forward in the early part of the industrial period. You've also got, as we enter into the 20th century and 19th century, you've got liberal reforms which is basically using taxes to help the old, the sick, the unemployed, children. You've also got surveys from the likes of Booth and Rowntree, who basically looked at the state of living conditions and wrote reports on them. And they found that our health was generally a lot worse than other countries in Europe, which basically inspired people or government in Britain to try and sort of improve living conditions and housing across England. And that led to somewhere in the region about 300,000 council houses being built. Obviously, if we enter into the modern period, we've got things like council houses being built, but we've also got the major one. I've put these in the wrong order. We've got the NHS. It's a massive public health move forward. And obviously, you can mention the Five Evil Giants and the work of Attlee in forming the NHS and Bevan. You've also got things more modern, things like Clean Air Acts and 5-a-day schemes and building of new towns like Chelmsford Wood and Milton Keynes. That really is public health for you guys. There's a lot there, but again, it's just to do with the move from laissez-faire to a government approach in the modern era. Hopefully that helps.